And now it's my pleasure to introduce our today's session speaker, Dr. Vincenzo Lorusso. Vincenzo is a policy officer at the European Commission's DG Research and Innovation, where he works on research and innovation cooperation with the African Union and with Nigeria, Rwanda, and South Africa. He is also the EU co-chair of the EU Innovation Agenda Working Groups. Vincenzo Lorusso, he brings a unique mix of experience across policy, industry, research, and academia, with a strong background in veterinary medicine, public health, and African development. Therefore, we are very pleased to have Vincenzo with us today. So thank you, Vincenzo, for being here. Thank you very much for joining us and accepting our invitation. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much, Tifa, and good afternoon, everybody, or perhaps good morning, depending on some others' locations. I'm Vincenzo Lorusso, indeed. I'm very honored, very pleased to be here with you today in this webinar edition of the webinar series on innovation of STAR IDAZ. Many thanks to the organizers for inviting me. And I'm also humbled by being one of those 5, as I noted this, I believe, speakers, including a few, I would say most of them, whom I know in person personally. So I promise that while maybe today we will go a little bit higher level in the concepts, because we will talk about the policy or policy making, I want to reassure you on the fact that we will also be talking on policy doing. And indeed, as we will be focusing on the implementation of this joint African Union, European Union innovation agenda. So I really wish to convey with you information not only about why are we doing certain programs in the area of cooperation between Africa and Europe, but also what are these programs and what are these opportunities for you and your organizations to engage in this work that we do. So with this ambition and aspiration in mind, I'm going to start sharing my screen. And indeed, I hope following my presentation that I can only hope will be of your interest. I look forward to your viewpoints, your comments, before even questions and so on and so forth. So really, when the STAR IDAZ team and the CREAVET team approached me on the opportunity to talk with you as a community, I considering the organizations you're operating from in the area of animal health, whether it's academia, research, institutions, international organizations, industry, I thought this could be an opportunity for me to share the latest updates on the ongoing implementation of this 10-year joint policy, which is the African Union, European Union Innovation Agenda, of course, with particular focus on health and food and nutrition and sustainable and food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture, which indeed, as Latifa mentioned, is known within our field as FNSSA partnership. So a bit of a policy setting. The cooperation between the African Union and the European Union on research and innovation is governed under the aegis of a so-called political dialogue, which is the AU-EU High-Level Policy Dialogue on Science, Technology and Innovation, also called under the acronym of HLPD. This is the policy framework which was established in 2010, under which the priorities of the long-term priorities and the policy mainstays of these corporations are defined jointly. So it's a dialogue that is co-chaired by the European Commission on one hand and by the African Union Commission on the other, and then with memberships and partnerships of all AU-EU member states that participate in this dialogue and they provide their views. Now, under this dialogue, the 4 priority areas that you see here were established during the first ministerial meeting of July 2020. So it means that the cooperation on research and innovation between the African Union and the European Union will concentrate essentially on the areas of public health, green transition, innovation and technology, and capacities for science. By green transition, I would like to highlight that this macro area includes the two sub-areas of food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture, and climate change and sustainable energy. And therefore, for those of you working in the space of veterinary health, veterinary medicine, animal health, indeed, please keep in mind that your area of work is very much at the intersection, certainly within the area of public health, but also within the area of green transition for the food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture, but also is affected by the two other cross-cutting areas of innovation and technology and capacities for science, which is linked to capacity building, researchers and innovators mobility, exchange and sharing of technologies, and so on and so forth. So really, to say that these areas are very broad, and indeed there's space for enhancing the cooperation within animal health and veterinary sciences across the spectrum. Now, this year is particularly important. As I mentioned, this dialogue was institutionalized in the year 2010, and last year indeed was the 15th year anniversary of this dialogue, while it was also the 25th anniversary of the institutional cooperation between the two unions, the African Union and the European Union. But this year will also be important because we will have the second AU-EU Research Ministerial and Innovation Ministerial meeting that will take place in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And it will be a great opportunity to really take stock of what we achieved under this cooperation over the past few years. And indeed, since the political adoption of this African Union, European Union innovation agenda. And I would like indeed now to spend a few words on this policy initiative, the AU-EU Innovation Agenda, which was politically adopted in July 2023 by ministers of research and innovation of both the African Union and European Union. What does this agenda aim to achieve? A more effective translation of research and innovation into products, services, businesses, and job opportunities in both Africa and Europe across the different priority areas that you see in here. It was politically adopted in July 2023, and it will undergo implementation for 10 years from there, meaning until the end of 2033. You see, it consists of 4 objectives. It's beyond the scope of today's presentation to go into detail of them, but really the essence of it is really to make sure that our research and innovation cooperation goes beyond papers, conferences and symposia, which are certainly important and essential, including the capacity building and in exchange of knowledge and the sharing of know-hows and so on and so forth, but they're also contributing to more tangible socioeconomic impact on the ground. And indeed, talking about walking the talk and talking about implementation, which is actually now ongoing, the main instruments from the European Union side that are being devised and deployed to contribute to the implementation of this agenda are indeed Horizon Europe, with its particular Africa Initiative and Mediterranean Initiative, but also specifically for the area of public health and infectious diseases, also the Global Health European and Developing Countries Clinical Trials Partnership 3, EDCTP 3, and the Global Gateway Africa Europe Investment Package. Now, in some parts of my presentation, I will try to illustrate, hopefully as practically as possible, the ongoing opportunities and programs that are part of these initiatives, with opportunities for yourselves and your respective organizations. It is very important, even and particularly when a policy initiative is adopted, while it's being implemented, to make sure we sustain the political momentum about it. And therefore, our political leaders remain well aware of the importance of the policies to which we jointly commit and of the ongoing implementations that we are working on. And in the last, these are excerpts of the the declaration of the last 7th AU-EU summit that took place in Luanda, in Angola, in November last year. And as you can see, I think as a community, we can rejoice ourselves about the fact that indeed our leaders have recognized the increasing importance of the cooperation on science, technology, innovation, education, and entrepreneurship between the two continents in the overall, their importance in the overall Africa-Europe relationship. Of course, highlighting the important role of youth, especially, of course, for obvious reasons, within the African continent, considering the bulging youth population. And of course, not to be neglected at all, and valorize the role of women, who play indeed a crucial role in innovation ecosystems, research, and entrepreneurship. Particularly the role of African diaspora in the innovation agenda and the innovation ecosystems is also recognized in this joint declaration, not just for the financial inputs that African diasporas in Europe or in the US, in North America, elsewhere, are contributing to Africa-based innovation ecosystems, but also for the contribution in terms of expertise and know-how. When this agenda was prepared in the years between 2020 and 2023, and this was done jointly by a dedicated AU-EU Innovation Agenda Working Group that I have the pleasure and honor to co-chair from the EU side. This working group reports to this high-level policy dialogue that I mentioned earlier on. The starting point was really mapping, scoping the major gaps and needs affecting research and innovation ecosystems in both Africa and Europe. And you see them grouped in here in 5 chapters. I also want to acknowledge that a lot of the time the gaps and needs do not necessarily just belong to a specific chapter rather than the other. And indeed, the frontier between 2 of them or several of them can certainly perhaps be difficult to distinguish. And these are innovation ecosystem, innovation management, knowledge exchange, including technology transfer and sharing, access to finance, and human capacity development. Now, one of the reasons why I'm sharing this with you today is the fact that indeed we realize constantly, a lot of the times, that in the area of cooperation between Africa and Europe, a lot of the gaps and needs can be addressed not just with funding. Funding is certainly an important component, but there are other aspects, other facets of the cooperation and of the ecosystems that need to be addressed for opportunities, innovative ventures to be scaled up. For example, business and marketing support, intellectual property support, better understanding of patentability, freedom to operate, and so on and so forth. And so this AU-EU Innovation Agenda really aims at tackling these gaps and needs in a multidimensional way by addressing all these different chapters at the same time. And of course, for this endeavor, which is very ambitious, I acknowledge that, to be successfully realized, we need to be working beyond the silos. We need to break those silos and work as multidisciplinary and multisectorally as we can. Therefore, not just involving the public bodies, the funders, at the same time, the research and innovation performing institutions, higher education institutions, but also the private sector. By private sector, I mean as much the SMEs, the startups, but also the big corporations that do deliver a lot of the innovations across different sectors to the marketplace, and at the same time, civil society organizations. In the next few slides, well, 3 slides actually, I provide summaries of the actions foreseen by this agenda, highlighting in red those that are the most pertinent, at least in my view, to this conversation and to the work that is done by network members of the STAR IDAZ network, and therefore for public health and green transition with specific emphasis on food security. Now, we haven't got the time to go into the details. I'm just going to go through some of them. For example, in the short-term action for public health, this agenda foresees supporting health research and innovation outputs turn into relevant products, policy guidance, and services, as I mentioned earlier. Or also developing joint research and innovation agendas on health priorities, enhancing best practices and common standards, using emerging technologies, encompassing communicable and non-communicable diseases, as well as mental health in infants, youth, and adults. And when we look at non-communicable and communicable diseases, indeed some practical examples are provided, including, among others, poverty-related neglected diseases, antimicrobial resistance, and zoonosis. When we look at the food and nutrition security component of the short-term actions, action number 4 foresees fostering the development and enhancement of sustainable and resilient agricultural and food system value chains. Perhaps I can take a little stop here to comment on the fact that this action really means supporting the development and the enhancement of sustainable value chains within the African continent. And of course, the veterinary sector is very much affected when we look, for example, at dairy products value chains, which in a lot of Africa can still develop, and they need to be developed, as well as, of course, value chains concerning meat products. I also highlighted an action related to supporting the development and scale up of efficient and sustainable management of water resources, because indeed the nexus between water, food systems, as well as health and public health is very relevant in Africa as well as elsewhere, and certainly within the Africa-Europe cooperation. As we move from short-term to medium-term actions, I still highlighted the actions that pertain to this conversation today. So for public health, ensuring tech transfer and improving and developing affordable, equitably available and accessible quality vaccines, medicines and health technologies, ensuring the development of specific training curricula and capacity building throughout the value chain of health technologies. And then as we move from public health to food and nutrition security and agriculture, fostering digital applications and green technologies to enhance climate resilience and adaptation for agriculture and agroecological production, healthy and sustainable food processing and consumption, and catalyzing the development of circular economy strategy and policies in both food and nutrition security and agriculture, and climate change and sustainable energy. Now, these are actions that are thematically pertinent to today's conversation, and I believe, hopefully, to the organizations that you are affiliated to, and also to the STAR IDAZ network. But at the same time, there are cross-cutting actions that are still relevant to the work that you do, I believe. For example, promoting joint master doctoral degrees between AU and EU universities and mobility of researchers for capacities for science. Or as we go back to the short-term actions, strengthening R&D cooperation between AU, EU, higher education and governmental institutions through knowledge transfer, teaming, twinning and learning mobility activities, and so on and so forth. So were you familiarized, if you haven't done this yet, with the content of this AU EU Innovation Agenda, if anything at all, I would like to please keep in mind that indeed it can affect, hopefully as positively as possible, the work that you do multidimensionally, and therefore so could be your engagement within this work. And then for the long-term actions, there are two actions that pertain to public health and the green transition for food and nutrition security. You see them highlighted here. For public health, designing and implementing new methods and tools to monitor, prevent, and counteract future health threats, including long-standing, re-emerging, antimicrobial resistant pathogens, as well as chronic diseases, promoting One Health and precision medicine in a changing environment, embedding the mental health dimension in this approach. And then as we move from public health to green transition, food and nutrition security, improving the agricultural innovation ecosystems to strengthen capacities of actors to co-design, co-invest, and scale up and employ innovative technologies and methodologies through a multi-stakeholder approach, engaging the private sector and fostering public-private partnerships, enhancing capacity for job creation in agriculture and fisheries, and for proactive innovation policy. I know it's a lot of words, and hopefully in the second part of this conversation, I'll explain as practically as I can what we are doing for that. There are indeed several partnerships, AU-EU partnerships, in public health and in food and nutrition security and agriculture that are contributing to the ongoing implementation of this agenda. For public health particularly, we have the joint undertaking, the Global Health European and Developing Countries Clinical Trials Partnership, EDCP, now currently in the third cycle of funding, that's why it's called EDCP3, which will be running until 2031. It's organized in work program. We are now currently in work program 2026. It basically works on calls for proposals for which indeed projects are retained and granted, for the focusing on the clinical development of innovative solutions against mainly poverty-related and neglected infectious diseases, diagnostics included, by the way, and also at the same time enhances research, innovation, and regulatory capacity in African countries. For the Partnership of Food and Nutrition Security and Sustainable Agriculture, FNSSA, the main funding instrument is represented by Horizon Europe, and it's the calls for proposals that are coming from the Cluster 6 that I will illustrate later on. I thought I would also spend one slide on an equivalent initiative, equivalent to STAR IDAZ, which is a project, See First, that is funded, the Secretariat is funded by Horizon Europe as a coordination support action project. It's really a sister initiative that aims to operationalize the International Research Consortium, the IRC, on food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture. It really aims to bring together, as a network of networks, as many institutions in the area of food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture, and of course, animal health and veterinary sciences are completely embedded into that, to then contribute together to the actions, to the implementation of the actions of the innovation agenda for FNSSA that I illustrated earlier on. So my first little plea here is that if this is of interest, I would warmly encourage you to consider the opportunity to subscribe, to be a part and a member institution of the IRC on FNSSA as well, while you are, of course, a member of the STAR IDAZ, because indeed it's through synergies that we can enhance and amplify impact. Currently, there are approximately 90 members, as you can see, 33 from Europe and 63 from Africa. When we look at the public health actions, one big EU-funded initiative that is contributing to a really unprecedented program, which enhances the capacity and creates capacity for manufacturing of vaccines, medicines, and health technologies in the African continent, is the so-called Team Europe initiative, MAV+, so manufacturing access to vaccines, medicines, and health technologies. This was established launched in 2021, really, and this was a major outcome of the COVID-19 pandemic and the effects it had on the African continent, and the major realization of the fact that Africa produces less than 1% of the vaccines that it needs, right? So the goal here is to enhance, in a nutshell, the capacity of the African continent to produce up to 60% of its vaccines locally by the year 2040, right? And to do this, funding does not just come from the European Commission, from the European Investment Bank, as you can see in here, but also comes from EU member states in a Team Europe approach, so in a coordinated European approach in collaboration with the African continent and the Africa-based institutions, such as, for example, among others, Africa CDC, Africa Medicine Agency, and the EU member states involved in these concerted efforts. You see them in here: Belgium, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Spain. We're talking about an overall budget of 2 billion euros. It's beyond the goal of today's discussion to go into the detail of what the program does, but I would like to, it's basically setting up and scaling up capacity for the African continent, for African companies, therefore, to be able to produce, based on the local demands, vaccines, medicines, and health technologies that are responding to local needs when it comes to communicable and non-communicable diseases. The focus countries are summarized, brought together in this slide here. As you can see, it's 5 of them as we speak, mostly in essentially in sub-Saharan Africa. And importantly, these programs, while they're intervening at the industry level by supporting the value chain and the capacity for the African companies to Africa-based companies to really produce active ingredients and at the same time vaccines and biotechnologies, we're also intervening at regulatory level, enhancing, contributing to the enhancement of capacity of regulatory bodies at country level and regional level, and at the same time also with supporting specialty program, master's programs, educational programs within local universities, because of course this needs to go hand in hand in order to secure the qualified skill force, workforce within these companies that have been, whose capacity has been enhanced from a manufacturing and production viewpoint. As we implement this AU innovation agenda, and this is also a hopefully readily seizable opportunity for you all, we go beyond programs and projects. We also organize numerous stakeholder events with the purpose of facilitating networks among stakeholders, researchers, innovators, research performing organizations in the space of Africa-Europe cooperation. And one of these big events that we do is an annual innovation fair, through which we organize pitches of innovators, of researchers, to potential collaborators, peers, but also to investors. Because what we want to the second big goal of these events is not just to facilitate networkings and collaborations, but also to secure investments and further scale up in their risking to the innovative solutions that are being presented by the innovators and researchers that have been selected to pitch on stage. We had a large innovation fair in Brussels in October 2025. For the first time in that very case, we brought together the cooperation between Africa and Europe on research and innovation, with that between Europe and the Mediterranean region, so including North Africa and the Near and Middle East. We also organize biannual workshops on different topics according to the thematic areas of the innovation agenda, one in the first semester and the other one in the second semester. These year's workshops will focus on youth-led innovations, to be organized by June, and the one in the second half of the year on social science and humanities in the AU innovation agenda. They're usually hybrid, accessible indeed, being both online and on-site. And the work that we're doing in the space of this AU innovation agenda is pretty much, or very much, should I say, science diplomacy in practice. And therefore, we started in October last year, we institutionalized the science diplomacy dialogue between the African Union and European Union, which meant that now, from that time onwards, every year, we will be running annual workshops on science diplomacy in the AU-EU space. This year event is most likely taking place in Kenya at beginning of October. Of course, you receive a copy of this presentation by clicking on the hyperlink here. It will direct you to the so-called AU-EU Innovation Interface, for which you can keep abreast on all the activities, including upcoming events in this space. So I think this is also another way, very practical, to engage in this work for your organizations, and so also to expand the footprint and the impact of the work that you do in the space of this cooperation. A bit of an overview of the innovation fair that we had in Brussels last year, with more than 500 participants on site and more than 200 online. Hopefully, perhaps some of you attended. You will tell me in a second. We organized pitches of innovators who went on stage and presented their solutions to an audience of investors and collaborators. 18 of them were selected to pitch on stage, and they were the outcome of more than 250 expressions of interest, coming as much from Africa as well as from the Mediterranean basin and Europe. And that's a bit of the outlook of the event, with the pitching happening in the main hall, the exhibition space where the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the research institutions, research and innovation performing organizations were presenting demonstrations of their innovative solutions, and in this case, the awarding of the winners according to a evaluating jury amongst the startups that presented their innovative solutions. Because we do not want to stop on this, we don't want this event to be a one-shot experience. We want to make sure indeed the support is sustained and the scale up is continuous. We set up a mechanism according to which the startups that were brought on stage in Brussels at the Innovation Fair are now receiving a bespoke, tailor-made support in their innovative solutions, including marketing, intellectual property, business design, and business management. And this happens through a particular project that is called the Africa-Europe Innovation Project, which is a Horizon Europe project that runs until June 2027. It's really a coordination support action project. So in a way, it works also as a network of networks in the same spirit as the Star IDAZ, and it's really topic agnostic, and therefore entities from across the priority areas of the AU-EU innovation agenda are certainly welcome to join these networks, and opportunities are there. Indeed, opportunities are available also as part of already ongoing projects, Horizon Europe funded projects. So if you are working in this space of cooperation, and especially if you represent an association or a network, I can only warmly encourage you to subscribe to the Africa Europe Innovation Platform, where opportunities for matchmaking and to enhance your collaborations are readily available there. And of course, as we provide further support to these organizations, we are constantly monitoring and evaluating the progress we're able to support, because indeed that's really the goal of the AU innovation agenda. That's an overview of the Africa Europe Innovation Platform, with links accessible as you will receive this presentation. And I'm also very happy to announce, while I'm checking the time, Latifa, that this year's edition of the Innovation Fair will focus specifically on food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture. And so for those of you working in the space of livestock, dairy products, livestock diseases, zoonoses, I believe this fair will be of your interest. It will take place in November. The exact date is yet to be confirmed, and will take place at Ciambari in Italy. Will still be hybridly accessible. We will keep on publishing information on that on the AU Innovation Interface. The goal of this fair will be, and we will set up a call for expressions of interest. It's basically to showcase innovative outputs and outcomes that are coming from collaborative projects, including Horizon Europe projects, but that have reached the end, or maybe already are about to be concluded soon, and would still need particular support to be scaled up further and turn into actual products, and therefore reach the marketplace and societal uptake. We want to make sure that through this kind of event, we provide an opportunity for these initiatives to be invested on and be further scaled up. So indeed, because we are aware that projects are funded for some time, then they finish, and then perhaps we run the risk of reinventing the wheel, if I could use this expression, in the next cycle of funding. We want to break this cycle and turn this into a virtuous cycle indeed. That's the way the AU-EU Innovation Interface looks like, for you to keep in mind. There's also another plea that I would like to make today, because it's usually, when you speak it to a funder, I understand that there's an expectation for the funder to present programs and opportunities available, which I'm going also to continue doing. But there's also a plea that I would like to make. For those of you that are working in the space of Africa-Europe cooperation today, and if what you do resonates with the actions and objectives that are of this AU innovation agenda, there's an opportunity for your institution to apply for an expression of interest for your projects, programs, scholarships. And I think Star IDAZ should certainly be there to be included in the dashboard of the AU EU innovation agenda. This dashboard is really a living repository of initiatives that are in line with at least one objective and one action of the innovation agenda, with the purpose of connecting the dots as much as possible. So it's for initiatives that are already up and running, have secured funding, or for initiatives that are about to be launched, and with the purpose of really bringing them together in a dashboard in a way through which practically initiatives can be better aware of each other to then possibly start collaborating with each other and ideally synergizing. For initiatives to be included in the dashboard, so there's an expression of interest mechanism that everybody can file in and submit. We have a dedicated task force within the Africa-Europe Working Group that reviews the expression of interest on a monthly basis and provides feedback thereafter. So the initiatives need to adhere to this checklist of 10 criteria, which are rather inclusive more than exclusive, I promise. Of course, they need to be in line with the actions and objectives of this agenda and contribute to socioeconomic development in Africa and or Europe. And that's the way the dashboard looks like. You see initiatives are grouped according to thematic areas with the initiative title, the action title, the title of the action to whose implementation that contributes, the time of start and end, the funding entity, the implementing entity, and the budget that is attached to them. And the geographical scope, sometimes at regional level and at times at a country level, when we can be more specific and depending on the size of the entity of the project. There's no limit in funding, so initiatives can be included whether they are supported by 10,000 euros or whether they're supported by several millions. And of course, initiatives are grouped according to actions and of course thematic areas, so short-term, medium-term, and long-term actions in the case of public health. And the same for food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture. So please do consider submitting an expression of interest. What's in there for you? Well, when the initiative is retained, we then share a communication package that could be used from a corporate communication viewpoint, through which your organization can announce that your project program, and you can submit several projects at the same time, is being recognized as officially contributing to the implementation of the AU EU innovation agenda. And so can also provide a further enhanced credibility for the work that your organization does when you approach further funding opportunities. And as we're talking about funding, and this will bring my presentation to an end, I wish to also share some latest information on the calls for proposals that are part of Horizon Europe Work Programme 26-27 that I think will be of interest for the researchers, innovators, the stakeholders attending today's webinars. They are especially those that are part of the Africa Initiative 4 and the Mediterranean Initiative 3. These are initiatives that aim to enhance the cooperation between African and European researchers and innovators and European and Mediterranean research and innovators in the spirit of contributing to the implementation of these joint policies that are being presented. The Africa Initiative 4 and the Mediterranean Initiative 3, they are calls for proposals from the clusters that you see in here, which are typical of Pillar 2 of Horizon Europe, the framework program, which is the biggest public funding mechanism that supports research and innovation running until 2027. In this case, I'm going to spend some time on the cluster of health and number 1, and cluster 6 on food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture, and environment for the obvious reasons, right? Just to say that this being the Africa Initiative 4, it means that it's indeed part of a series of initiatives that we launched in 2021 with the aim to really walk the talk and provide a robust instrument to contribute to the implementation of this policy, AU-EU innovation agenda. While we do so, we're also monitoring the participation of African institutions in the research project consortia that have been funded under Horizon Europe compared to the previous framework program Horizon 2020. As you can see from the absolute numbers and figures here, the percentages here are very encouraging. We're seeing overall a major increase of Africa's participation in Horizon Europe compared to the past. These are quantitative data nonetheless. We're also looking at the qualitative data. We're also looking at making sure that the participation is as widespread as possible and therefore not only includes the most established African research and innovation institutions, but also other players within this space. And of course, this is also why we engage in webinars like today, because it's an enduring, continuous endeavor. And we're also monitoring participation at country level in Horizon Europe compared to Horizon 2020. You will keep this for your records. So these are the calls. We're talking about 25 calls for proposals for a budget of approximately 500 million euros. I highlighted the hyperlink here, which I'm also going to put in the chat in a second. This will take you to the list of 25 topics of the Africa Initiative 4, which include also those on health and food and nutrition security that could be of hopefully most of your interest, plus 2 of the European Developing Countries Clinical Trials Partnership, EDCP3, which could be of your interest. The calls for proposals in the area of public health are about the prevention and treatment of infectious diseases, from small molecules to monoclonal antibodies, novel vaccines against viruses with epidemic potential, innovative antimicrobials for resistant pathogens, better understanding and anticipation of impacts of climate change on health. And those on food and nutrition security really range from water, nutrition, energy nexus to the AU-EU partnership is the coordination and support action on food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture. These are the overall semantics, so to say. Here you find the exact calls for proposals. So by clicking on the hyperlink that you have in here, you'll be able to then find the details of all these topics and calls for proposals that you see in this table here. So I can only hope that they will be of interest to your work. Keep in mind, please, that for 2 of these 6 calls for proposals, the deadline is within a month. For the other, it's certainly more comfortable as it is for next year. And the same for cluster 6 on food, bioeconomy, natural resources, and agriculture and environment. You see there's 2 calls for which the deadline is approaching next month, otherwise more comfortable for 3 out of 5. I did the same for the Mediterranean Initiative, but keep in mind that for health, the calls for proposals of the Mediterranean Initiative, 3, are exactly the same, are included within the 6 of the Africa Initiative. Indeed, because we need to be working beyond the silos and making sure there's consistency between the geographical cooperation. I also flagged 2 calls for proposals that are of interest for those of you working in the area of preparedness and early warning systems. The call on advanced local digital twins using AI for early warning and preparedness. The deadline is April, 15th of April, next month, really, 2026. Otherwise, international cooperation on artificial intelligence. And still for the Mediterranean cooperation, there's 2 calls here, one particular with specific focus on fisheries, by fishers for fishers, co-management of marine and freshwater ecosystems and resources. So again, opportunities for you and the deadline, hopefully, and the deadline is the 23rd of September. For the EDCP3 joint undertaking, we are past the deadline of the 2-phase calls that you see in here. Nonetheless, there are 2 coordination and support actions calls for proposal, and coordination and support actions, as the colleagues from the IDAZ Secretariat know very well, are indeed those calls for proposals that aim to support projects that are dealing mostly with facilitation of networks of research and innovation institutions rather than just on performing research and innovation projects. And these are 2 calls with deadlines early September, one on enhancing integrated research and healthcare in sub-Saharan Africa through digital innovation and AI, and another one on training and innovation networks for sustained capacity development related to ethics, regulatory, pharmacovigilance, and related digital regulatory platforms. I'm going to bring this to a conclusion just for you to say that I included some slides on some work that we do in mapping the projects that we funded over the past 10 years in the area of food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture, including also projects that are dealing with veterinary health and development of vaccines for livestock use. Because indeed, as I said, we're now working on looking at the innovative outputs and outputs that have been generated as part of these projects. And we're now embarking on a journey through which we want to provide ad hoc investments, bespoke investments onto these projects for scaling them up. So we work extensively in the area of food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture. For those of you, including those coming from companies who are attending today's webinar, who may be interested in potentially, why not, investing in some of these projects, I'll be up for conversations. So please keep this in mind. And we have a dedicated report that really ends up by having a lineup, a pipeline of projects based on which assessed based on the intervention and market readiness potential. And we're now working really relentlessly in securing investment opportunities to the projects that we assessed as the most promising from a market readiness and innovation potential viewpoint. For those of you who are interested in monitoring, evaluation, and learning, we also have an annual assessment of the ongoing impact of the ongoing implementation of the agenda. Here is the link to the report. And these are my conclusions. So public health and food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture are at the core of the ongoing action of implementation of the innovation agenda. And this 10-year unprecedented, it didn't exist before, joint policy that has been co-created and is now being implemented as collaboratively as we can. It's a great concrete opportunity to connect the dots and initiatives with that. And the dashboard of the EU Innovation Agenda that I presented is a concrete opportunity to make this happen. Also for initiatives that are already up and running, and they will be running without the policy. This is also one of the rationales for which we created this living inventory. Also to build on positive outputs and outcomes of past projects, because we are extremely acutely aware of the fact that indeed when project funding closes, what are we doing for scaling up the good that comes out of that project, those projects, and turn that good into better. But also
Sorry
leverage.
for interrupting, Vincenzo. We still have 2 minutes for the presentation. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry.
I'll be done in less than 10 because this is my conclusion slide. At the same time, leverage synergies between human and animal health, R&I programs, and this is why we're more than happy to be in today's conversation. And beyond Horizon Europe, as we are trying to provide bespoke investments on outputs and outcomes that are coming from collaborative projects, we need everybody's engagement. And therefore, investment does not only need to come from the public funders, from the big international financial institutions, but also from private sector, philanthropy, coordination and support actions, involvement of all research and innovation performing institutions and their networks is essential. And so this is my final plea. Let's do this together. And it means that by today's conversation being done this way, I will definitely engage the STAR IDAZ network and all members into the conversation that will lead into the Innovation Fair in November in Italy. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Vincenzo. I'm sorry because, you know, we need to keep to time. And, well, it was a nice presentation full of information. And thank you so much. It gives, I think, valuable insights on EU-Africa cooperations, EU and EU dialogue on science diplomacy, innovation projects. You talked about the interface, Africa Initiative for Calls. I see that all of these initiatives are very valuable for the participants and for the collaboration and the cooperation between EU and EU. Thank you so much. We will now open the Q&A session. So for those who haven't done so yet, please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A window on your screen. We will go through them and let's see if there is. I see the Q&A is still empty. Chat window also. Okay. We give a bit of time to our participants to reflect on all this information and ask their questions. Then I start myself to ask my question. So Vincenzo, putting my shoes on today's attendees, what are the 3 ways through which the organizations or their organization can actively engage in the work of the EU innovation agenda? Can you summarize that for our participants? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Latia, for this question. So there are at least 3 in my view, 3 readily available opportunities to engage as actively as possible. I will start by perhaps the easiest one. And, you know, this was my first plea. You can submit your expression of interest for your ongoing initiatives. If you have any projects, programs, scholarship schemes, partnerships that are in line with the objectives and actions of this Africa-Europe Innovation Agenda, please do consider submitting an expression of interest for your initiative to be recognized and included in the dashboard of the AU Innovation Agenda. It's a way really to connect the dots better, for initiatives to know each other better, to possibly collaborate and synergize. It's a visibility exercise, but it goes beyond PR. There's no immediate funding available to that. I say immediately because indeed it still enhances the credibility of the work that you do, hopefully. Number two, if you're working in the space indeed of livestock health, I think the Innovation Fair on food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture that we're organizing in November, it could be an opportunity for you to engage, to present some of the works of the projects or initiatives of the startups that you're working with, and also to come and further network there. And number three, the easiest, maybe from a at least theoretical viewpoint, consider indeed being part of a project consortia, one or multiple of one, that put together a project proposal to respond to the calls of Horizon Europe Africa Initiative 4 that I presented.
Thanks, Vincenzo. I think it's very clear. If anyone have a question, please write it down in chat or in Q&A, doesn't matter, or raise your hand and we can also unmute your mic. That is also possible. Can I just ask you, Vincenzo, if you recall, or there is a success story that you want to bring it today, maybe as example from this EU collaboration?
Yes, well, thank you very much for this question. I think there are several. I mean, I think it depends also on the size. But for example, one that hopefully speaks when it comes to public health and infectious diseases, I want to mention the story of a startup that was funded in Piemonte in Italy, Need Biotech, developing an early prostate cancer detection kits that could be used in rural areas of any parts of the world as remotely as it could be. And they were selected amongst the pitchers of the Innovation Festival in Cape Town in July 2023. And through their engagements now, they are in conversation with several regulatory agencies within Africa, for example, Nigeria. So this is a European innovation that has been set up in a lab, in a spin-off, I believe, of a local university in Piemonte. Is now being scaled up for being used in Europe, in Africa, and potentially elsewhere. Of course, with the work that we do, we want to amplify such stories and mainstream them. You know, this is an example of a European entity, but could also be an example of an African startup, of an African small, medium-sized company that is now setting up, expanding its footprint within the European continent. It's a two-way process by all means.
Yeah, I see that. And from your experience, how do you think that that are the practical steps that can make the EU cooperation and collaboration, all the innovation agenda, let's say, exactly can deliver practical results or tangible results for researchers, for example?
Well, I think, you know, the Horizon Europe projects are very great, you know, concrete opportunities for collaboration between researchers and innovators to happen while addressing shared challenges and different topics. That for sure. The work that we do when it comes to the innovation fairs and the engagement, I think is also an opportunity for researchers to benefit from support, from funding to business and intellectual property, and so on and so forth. I think it's also an opportunity to be working in a better way in networks, because a lot of the time we see initiatives that don't necessarily communicate with each other. And I think we now, with this policy initiative, we have more occasions to bring together institutions and researchers, and therefore for them to you know, for the impact to be amplified from that. But the opportunities are there. And I think by watching some of these spaces, and I'm actually going to conclude by putting the links in the chat, I think that's an easy way also to be kept abreast of what we do.
Yeah, many thanks, Vincenzo. There is a question about your slides. Tades asks if it's possible to share your slides.
Absolutely, by all means. Do you want to do that because you have the PDF, or should I do that? You tell me, or you want to?
Yeah, you can. So you can be in touch with me or Hannah at the end of the session, and we can share that, of course. I see another question. Thank you for the presentation. Will the recording be available? Yes, it's gonna be available sometimes after today. You can connect to Star IDAZ website to stay updated, or you can go to Star IDAZ YouTube channel on YouTube, and you see all the previous sessions and also today webinar. Thank you so much. If there's still no question, we can maybe wrap up the meeting, and thank you all for your participation.
Sorry, Latifa, there are some comments in the chat. I don't know if you
okay. I didn't see it. Yeah, I see that. Do you see the question, Vincenzo? Can there be a platform, or is there a platform where institutions from Africa can link with potential institutions from Europe to matchmake or collaborate on projects that can be implemented in Africa? This is Haruna Adamu.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for your
Haruna,
question.
and absolutely important. In answer to this question, I will say yes. We have this Africa Europe Innovation Platform project. I'm going to put the link in the chat. It will require you and your organization you to register on behalf of your organization. And indeed, it's exactly the purpose of the platform is to address what you just mentioned in your question. So the link will be my answer to your question next to my gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes. Yeah. The link is there. Yeah. Okay,
and last but not least, I'm going to put in the chat the link to the AU-EU Innovation Interface.
Yes, please. Yes, all the links can be useful for the participants. Please feel free, Lorenzo, to put them there. Yeah. I'm checking the chat window. If still any question there? Nope.
And perhaps, Latif, if I may, to complement my answer to Aruna's question, for an individual, a researcher that wants to also find opportunities or mobility schemes like Paris Cluster Key Actions that would allow to spend some time in Europe and then come back, or within also in other African institutions. I'm going to put the link in the chat of the Euraccess Africa, where an individual, in this case, not an organization, but an individual can register and indeed look for potential partners based on topics of interest. So, and perhaps, by the way, maybe something to think of, we can also organize information session in which we explain how to use the Horizon Europe funding and tenders portal, because it provides for opportunity to search for partners based on the specific topics and call for proposals. This is something that we also do. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and for just from my side, for Africa Initiative for calls, because the deadline are soon, is one of the links can work to see the full information about yes, that's the first link. Yes, Latifa, that's the first link I put in the chat. That link would take you to a list of 27 topics, which are the 25 of the Africa Initiative 4, plus the 2 that are still open, the early September one for the Global Health Initiative 3.
Okay, thank you so much. That's great. Okay, if still no question from the participants, I think we are just on time. Thank you so much. Thank you for accepting this invitation again, Vincenzo. Thanks to all the participants and the attendees for their time. And warm thank you to Hannah, who is supporting us in the background and ensuring everything runs smoothly. A reminder that the recording of the webinar will be made available and disseminated through IDAZ channels. So please feel free to share it with colleagues who may benefit from this presentation and information. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you all or to having you in the next session. Thank you. Bye-bye.